Adam Mares is back. We got world's finest in the house. We're going to go over the last 48 hours of in Nuggets world because it's been pretty insightful. We'll go over all that plus a little bit of a preview for the Blazers game on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and being with us all throughout the week, 5 days a week, being an everydayer, checking us out on the daily, Monday through Friday. Appreciate you guys being part of our community. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Adam Mares. He's back from vacation, and boy, are his arms tired. He's also director of content for DNVR. Josh Whittinger says, is this a weird time or am I going crazy? Yeah, it's a weird time. We decided to do it in the afternoon today with Adam getting back in the swing of things. So afternoon show. We will have a show tomorrow. It's going to be Swipe Up. I may hop on if I can. We'll go over the Blazers game. I don't know what we're going to say, but we'll go over the Blazers game.
No, it's an interesting one. You see Murray out, or is he out? I think he's out.
So
did that go across? Let me make sure I got this right.
With him being I would just say that even with him being out, they should win this game. That is an interesting kind of twist, though, for I didn't say the injury report. Jamal Murray is out with bilateral tibia inflammation, as well as Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has a right finger sprain. They're going to rest him as well. I kind of talked about this, about how they need to get some rest for guys, and so it makes sense. They have just a small number of back-to-backs left, so it's probably smart for them to go ahead and take this approach. On today's show, we're going to talk about the last 48 hours in Nuggets world and kind of like what we've learned. Hasn't been a dramatic one, but there is a lot of stuff I think that for us to kind of figure out and go through and talk about. So there's a lot to get to there. And in the later segment, we'll preview the Blazers game. And I wanted to get, as part of this discussion on the last 48 hours, I want to talk to Adam a little bit in the second segment about what the best possible outcomes are for the Nuggets. There's a way for them to get a lot of what they want and balance it all out. And that, to me, is kind of going to be one of my themes for the day. But Adam Mares, first, glad to have you back. Missed you, buddy.
Good to be back. Let's
start here. From the last 48 hours of information, we can kind of go through this. What is the biggest piece of information that you think is most relevant? Oh, maybe not. You like that one.
Well, I was sitting here trying to think of that. And then I was like, none of these are really biggest. So then it's like, all right. Actually, there might be one that if I were to say a biggest one, I think the Nuggets are aligned, even if they haven't articulated it together, because I don't get the sense that they've sat down and said, what is our biggest goal or this or that. But I do think that they are aligned if you read between the lines. And that is that their biggest goal between now and the playoffs is to find the rhythm of their best brand of basketball. And I think it was actually, was it Jokic or MPJ or both of them who sort of said this? Because they, again, Malone, everybody's talked and said something about it, the one seed and health and this or that. And I think you would always say, is the one seed more important or being healthy? And they've said effectively, neither. The most important thing is to be playing our best brand of basketball going into the playoffs, which obviously implies health. But I think it's more than that. It's like, okay, we've gotten to this point playing different styles, doing different combinations. We need to figure out what it is that we are going to do to win in the playoffs. And we need to start playing that now so that we're ready to go. I just thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting on a number of levels because I think, I'm always resistant to the idea of you need to be playing your best basketball going into the playoffs. And the reason is just because I study that stuff a lot and it doesn't necessarily
untrue.
It's just statistically untrue. However, I think a better kind of way to think about it from the Nuggets perspective is they don't need to be playing their best basketball and surging, right? They don't need to be red hot going into the playoffs. But I do kind of think of it like a car. One main, you need to get the eBay Motors guarantee fit on it. To one of our sponsors. Look at me. Because I do think this is kind of part of it is towards the All-Star break, a little bit of a rattle, some squeaking, brakes, little soft on the brakes. Could probably use a tune-up, not just an oil change, but car needs some maintenance. It's still a great car. It's still going to run perfect. It's still going to be faster than anything else on the road, but it needs work. And so I think this is the time to do that, whether it's replacing parts, which is kind of injury maintenance. It's like rest is replacing those parts and getting fresh ones in. And then, or if it's working on the mechanics and the processes and radiator flushes and fuel injection systems of getting into the flow of how they play basketball.
I don't want to see how far you can take this.
I can take it very far.
See how many more of these. Last year, that stretch in January that we talked about a lot, I feel like they haven't had one of those stretches, and I almost wonder if that's what they're hinting at. Is because to your point, when you talk about momentum going to the playoffs, it's often like, were they winning their last few games or something like that? But I think what they're probably indicating is, the second year coming back, there have been some ups and downs. Is it too Jamal Murray, Jokic centric? Is it too this? Is it too that? And I kind of think they probably feel that they want to see a stretch of basketball, find a rhythm whether it's the entire stretch, a portion of it, on demand. We 5 games over in the course of a 10-game stretch. There was 5 that were really important, and all 5 we were able to find the rhythm we want. I just think it's that they want to be like, we know. And by the way, the quotes did not make it sound like we have to figure out what our brand of basketball it is. It was more, we have to play, we have to get that rhythm. So I almost feel like they know what target they're aiming at. They know what it looks like, and they haven't proven it yet. And it's like, now's the time where we need to find and be able to do that. And if we can, then we'll go into the playoffs, and it doesn't matter the seed, it doesn't matter any of that. We know that's our best shot to win. And it's a very interesting perspective on it. And I like it. And more importantly, I like how aligned everybody seemed to be on it. Even Peyton Watson, when he was interviewed at practice, talked about, okay, I know now I need to go be the defensive player. Like, it's almost like I've explored my game, I've expanded it, but now in the playoffs, my role is going to be this, and I need to focus in and key in on that. And I just thought that was it was encouraging when I heard all those things.
And I think the Wizards game is kind of indicative of this, where for much of the season in games like they're going to have here versus the Wizards and the Blazers and versus the weaker teams that they'll face the rest of the way.
Yeah.
Like they've won. Their record versus those teams is great, but like they've won without really pushing themselves or without putting the hammer down. And like, I appreciate that. Like, I think it's good to kind of not spend, like, don't be throwing out your fastball versus these weak teams, just get through the game and move on to the next. But now, because you're trying to tighten up things, it doesn't really matter the opponent, because you're focused on you. And you're like, look, I don't need to go full bore in order to beat this team, but we do need to find that level of execution that we're searching for to be able to bring that versus these other squads. They'll have good matchups versus the Wolves and whoever else and the Lakers and other teams down the stretch here for them to also be working on that. But, even in these games here in this 2-game set, it's a good opportunity to start working on those mechanisms, to settle in, to really kind of focus in and be like, all right, we need to sharpen up now, even if we're not going to push necessarily to the end to win games in pursuit of that 1 seed.
And Matt, isn't it sort of Jokic personifies this? Because we've talked a lot about certain players who they use games like this to go off. Like, oh my gosh, it's a 60-point night, a 50-point night, whatever. I love that Jokic's version of that is perfection.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's padded his stats against a terrible opponent. And by the way, that team that played last night, Washington, that's the worst team I've seen in the NBA. That was the number 30th team in the NBA of what I've seen. But he used it to be perfect and to perfect decision-making and everything else. And I just love that, because I do feel like it was intentional. I'm not saying he was trying to have a perfect triple-double, but I do think it was one of those things where it's like, I'm going out there to be perfect in my decision-making, not necessarily dominant in my this or that. And I thought it was great. And like I said, you can't read in too much to what people say in scrums. They're not that meaningful as much as we would really love them to be.
Yeah.
But I did like that there seemed to be an alignment on this philosophical target that they're hitting or aiming for. And it makes me think that they're going to hit it.
On the other side, we'll talk a little bit about continuing this conversation. I want to hit on to some best possible outcomes, and we'll get Adam's thoughts on Michael Malone's very open commentary of why the 1 seed is not the priority this season. We'll talk about that up next on Locked On Nuggets. Right now, I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I've done hiring before, and it's a real challenge. You're going through all these resumes, and you don't know really well where to start. And whenever I'm giving people advice on getting jobs, I try and remind them A lot of times hiring processes can be random, but that's what's great about LinkedIn Jobs. It takes that randomness out of it, so you're actually going through the right process. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It's got a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring's easy when you have as many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire, and that's why they're constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Friday. Hope you have a great weekend. We'll have a show for you on Saturday, recapping the Blazers win. And Adam and I'll be back with you for World's Finest on Sunday night yet again. All right, Adam. So let's continue this kind of conversation. For me, the most pertinent piece of information to come out of the last 48 hours is Michael Malone's comments about the 1 seed. Now, this isn't surprising. This is something that we've kind of talked about and assumed. Like, none of us really were like, oh yeah, they're going to go for it, because we've understood from the very beginning, once you win a championship, that shifts your kind of how you approach the regular season. And it inspires a different level of confidence. This team is not scared about going on the road to any of the places that they would have to go to in the subsequent rounds. What I do think kind of it though is interesting is like, what does that mean? Because like you said, they want to build these good habits and have this process be in the rhythm that you talked about. That's going to lead to wins, because if they're playing their best basketball, this team is still extremely tough to stop. It's going to be about, I think, games like tonight where, okay, Jamal Murray's out, maybe KCP doesn't play. It's about being very selective with how they approach these final games, knowing that they do have a margin for error here. In my opinion, they will not slide further than 4. I don't think that they are. I have maintained, I don't think they're going to get the 1 seed, because I don't think they're going to push for it. But it'll be interesting to kind of see how they balance this out and what the results are of, because like you said, the rhythm doesn't necessarily mean like winning every single game, because sometimes that's about effort and they're not going to go full bore. It's about the approach to the process. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this works out. I want to get your thoughts on that. Plus, I'd like you to give a kind of an indication of what's like the threshold for the seed that you think that they need to get. Like, even if it doesn't matter, is there any, like, is it literally like they could be 6? Like,
no, it's 4. It's 4. You want to have home court in the first round, because you don't want to have to go on the road for every single series. Right. And I think the other thing is, you look at the 1 and the 2 and the 3, and you think, are those teams locks to make it to the next round? I think Denver could, in theory, be the 4 seed and have home court all through the West again. It's on the table. Yep. And I think Denver probably thinks that too, at least enough that the risk, cost benefit analysis of it is like, do we need to push for that when it might not even matter? So I think that's probably in there. So for me, it's 4. You don't want to be 5. You don't want to get past. If I were to pick a team to be the 5 seed, I think it would be Dallas. And I will say, for me, I think the other reason Denver and Malone cares less about the seeding is it's impossible to predict all of 5, 6, 7, 8 right now. And it probably will be the whole time. And you could climb to the 2 seed and end up with the single toughest matchup you could have drawn. In fact, I think there's a good chance of it. So I think that they probably look at that and go, there's no predicting how this is going to be. Be a home team in round 1 and don't worry about everything else within reason. Within reason. Play your best basketball. So I think that's going to be their approach. There are some marquee games against some teams, and as you get into the final 2 weeks, there probably will be a little bit more jockeying. And if you're within striking distance, okay, do we press a little? Does Yoke play 40 minutes in a game because this game determines the seeding? With 5 or 6 to go, I think we'll see that. But as of right now, I think you're going to see a rotation open up a little bit, and that's how they'll approach it. Which brings me to my actual, not biggest takeaway, but most interesting takeaway. Michael Malone is giving Zeke Naji his best and probably last shot. I thought his last shot happened already, Matt. I thought it happened in January, and Malone pulled him from the rotation. But not only did he say pregame, really hype up the idea of Zeke Naji's getting a shot. He's our guy. We want the depth. Not only did he talk about needing depth in the regular season and hey, we don't want to play Nikola all this time. We don't want to Aaron Gordon at center, all that. I think that's probably the primary motivation. but really trying to instill confidence in Zeke and then playing him as much as he did and then Zeke playing well. Yes, it was the Wizards. That's interesting to me because I honestly thought that train had sailed.
It's funny, on a show with Swipa on Tuesday, we talked about how, I guess it was yesterday, Thursday. I asked him, I was like, who outside of the top 8 do you think could have an impact in the playoffs? And I said Zeke, just based off of positional need.
Well,
I think that's part of this equation where they got to the trade deadline and didn't find a forward to come in and take those minutes. They didn't find a buyout candidate that their options were limited in terms of what they could do under the apron. And so now it's like they looked everywhere else, and then we're like, Zeke, man, welcome back, buddy. We're so excited to have you. Welcome it. Like, you're in, buddy. You're in the circle of, all these types of things. And you're right that I think there's probably a push to kind of do that. I do think it's smart that Malone, it's important to note that there are coaches that would have watched this season and stuck with DeAndre Jordan. They would have been like, DJ's played well for us. DJ's a veteran. Like, I trust DJ. And Malone, I think, is smart enough to be like, DJ is a veteran. I do trust DJ. DJ has played well for us. We cannot play him in a playoff series full time. Like, position, like maybe certain matchups, sure. Like, can see him getting minutes versus the Wolves if you're getting killed on the glass. Absolutely. But, as far as like what they're going to be able to produce going forward, I do think that Zeke Nnaji, I think it makes a lot more sense. I said it in return in regards to like, if they have an injury to the front court, Zeke's got to be the guy to fill in. He's the only one that makes any sense with kind of where their front court is at. So to me, that's part of this equation as well. I'll say that I think they need a 3 seed. Can they get done with a 4 seed? Yes. But I do think that if they have it, not the option, but if it's like, hey, if we like win 2 more games, we're almost definitely going to have a top 3. You should probably do that. You should probably,
but I mean, it comes down to matchups, don't you think? I mean, you're penciling Minnesota maybe into the 1 seed, but that's one game. It's possible that the Thunder are the 1 seed and the Wolves are the 2 seed. That's why I say I don't know. If you told me, would you rather a 4 seed opposite the Thunder or a 3 seed opposite the Wolves? I would rather have the 4 seed because I think that's an easier matchup, and the Wolves' likelihood of winning 2 playoff series is actually kind of low in my opinion. So that's why I say I think it's 2. I think when you look at all the moving parts, it's just like, man, I don't know what's best. I honestly don't know what's best from a seeding standpoint.
Yeah, it's also interesting, and a lot of that, one of the reasons that the players will consistently say, like, I don't really pay attention to the seedings or we're not tracking that. Right. Some of that's a lie with some of them definitely do. And they will ask me questions about it. But like, the reason that they don't is they're like, I don't know how this is going to end up above us. Like we just don't know. Right. Like you don't know if it's going to be like, for instance, I actually think it's going to be Thunder 1. I think it's going to be Thunder 1, Wolves 2, Nuggets 3, Clippers 4. That's my prediction.
That's a tough. I think that's a tough draw.
I would agree that it's a tough draw. I just don't know that. Like, I guess the easy one would theoretically be Thunder 1, even though they won the season series, or like Thunder 2, Nuggets 3, and the Nuggets in a 3-6 versus like the Pelicans. I guess is that like a better matchup? Let me ask you. I did want to ask you this. What's your preference order? And we'll talk about this a lot more before the playoffs get here. We were a long way off. But I am curious right now what your preference order is with Mavericks, Pelicans, Warriors, Lakers.
Mavericks, the toughest one. I'm a believer in the Mavs. I actually think they're sneaky great. And I think whoever draws the Mavericks got the short end of the stick this year of all the top teams. Like, I don't know if there's a good matchup for them. They're just a really, really good team. The trades they made, I really believe in. I think it's sustainable. I think they're one of those teams that can win multiple ways. I think the Suns are much more of a can only win one way. That's why they're less scary to me. Yeah. I think they can win more ways, and they have 2 really unstoppable players. So for me, I would say Mavs number 1 scariest, the other 3 tied for not scariest. And they're not to say that they're not scary. They all can beat you, but I think the Suns are more tragically flawed. I think the Suns remind me of last year's Suns. They got Bradley Beal, and I don't think they've really changed. The Pelicans are probably the least proven because they're such a bipolar team, but their best is actually pretty scary. Their worst is like Denver can sweep them. And then Sacramento, even though I don't buy Sacramento as a good team, I just am weirded out by the fact that Jokic always seems to play poorly against Sabonis. Or I shouldn't say poorly, but Sabonis always plays well against Jokic. That's the way I should phrase it.
Interesting. We'll get my thoughts on this as far as the order of the Nuggets matchups. Plus, we'll kind of wrap up this conversation and preview the game versus the Blazers. We'll do that on the other side here on Locked On Nuggets. Let's talk about FanDuel Sportsbook. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. I would probably go in a little bit tonight on some Aaron Gordon because their front court's pretty small outside of Ayton. And I think AG's and AG usually steps up when Jamal's out. So I like AG's maybe points and rebounds or rebounds and assists, either one tonight over on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us, making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us on a Friday. World's Finest, hanging out with you. You get back-to-back World's Finest. We'll be back on Sunday night as well. Zach says, Luka's winning MVP, second best player in the world. Five-ish says the instant willingness to play Zeke all of a sudden was a bit strange, in my opinion. Yeah, it was definitely, I think, notable. You wonder if there were some conversations that were had over the All-Star break in the Nuggets front office when they got back to work. So I'll say that I think my order of preference, I would agree with you. Mavs are probably last. I don't know what to do with the Warriors. I really don't, because
I wasn't even counting them.
I don't. Yeah. What's really funny, Adam, is I literally forgot to say the Suns. I forgot about the Phoenix, and like maybe I'll be wrong. Like it's really weird because I have so much respect for KD and Booker, and like how I think KD's been so great this season, and Nurk has actually given them this is the best season of Nurk's career, in my opinion. And I'm a lifelong.
KD, honestly, I'm going to pull on you on this. I'm going to push back. What is it that KD has done so well this year relative to previous years?
No, I wouldn't say that it's not relative to previous years. It's just he's still KD.
Okay. Yeah, well, he's still KD.
He's just such a. I was thinking about this because I was thinking about the difference between greatest and best. And I was just thinking a lot about who's the best player I've ever seen? Who's the best, and favorite people about skill. They a lot of people say Kyrie is the most skilled guy. I don't know, man. KD is so individually incredible. He doesn't make his teammates better, and he doesn't lift the game. And he doesn't control it. And if those things are how you define best, then I think that's totally fine. Just individual, hooping. God, KD's on my list, man. He's so amazing.
Are you talking about the guy that had 5 turnovers against the Mavs last night because he couldn't handle the weakest double teams?
I guess I saw the first half where he was kind of cooking and then they fell apart late. I really like that. He was making some tough ass shots in that first half. Anyway, I'll put the Mavs.
I'm a hater, but
I'll put the Mavs one. I don't know what to do with the Warriors. I really don't. I just don't know.
They're scary.
They're playing so well right now. It's against pretty weak competition. But they are the defense is back. They're surging. They've got Steph. They do use ball movement, so they're a team that can actually throw some interesting things at Denver. Great coaching. That one's tough for me to figure out because I'm still kind of look at them and I'm I don't know. I don't buy all of this, but I don't want to underrate them either. I want to give them the proper respect. Pelicans, I think, are interesting just from the Pelicans. It's their best games, they look so good, and when they lose, they look awful. They look so bad. So that's why I think a lot of that series might wind up being is could the Nuggets make them look bad?
Yeah,
the answer is probably yes.
And I'm not sure if their top players are smart enough. And I don't mean that as in they're dumb people. I just mean it as you have to sort of prove that you're able to adapt. Maybe it's more adaptable enough to be able to handle playoffs. Teams are going to force you into your worst thing, and I just don't know if they're the guys that have proven to be able to do that. So we'll see. Yeah,
we've talked about the Nuggets' ability to find those answers in various playoff series, and for me, it's I do see there's not a lot of well, I don't know what the answer would be. For me, I'm okay, versus the Wolves, I think they'll outshoot them. I think it'll be tough, but they'll outshoot them. Versus the Thunder, they'll outmuscle them because they're going to be a lot bigger than those kids. Versus the Pelicans, I think they would probably outsmart them. Their curve of execution is so high. Lakers, I think, run into both a shooting and a size problem. And then Warriors, I think its size is again like kind of the issue for Golden State is all of their solutions wind up with them being really kind of dwarfed in terms of size. But going to be kind of interesting, I think, to see. I do think there's like a really good scenario here where Jokic finishes like I would say second in MVP. They get second in the Western Conference. Like that to me is like the idea is that actually they get the second in the Western Conference. They're not the 1 seed because I do think there's a very good, like I'm with you. There's a very good chance the play-in tournament teams knocks out 8-1. I just think it's
very possible.
Like now I don't want to underrate, like I've said this on other shows. I said this on Anthony Irwin's show about like, look, the Lakers might win game 1 versus the Wolves and then Minnesota steadies itself and they just beat the snot out of them. That's entirely possible. OKC could be a lot better in the playoffs than we anticipate. Like those things are on the table.
What you're really saying is I think the Kings were better than the Warriors last year, but the Warriors clearly had the edge, from experience and just the mental edge and all of that stuff. And it went 7 games and it came down to Steph scoring 50. I think you're going to have similar dynamics in the first round with the top teams this year.
I'm not a Kings buyer. I've never been a Kings buyer. I don't think the Kings would have to be one of those things where I will believe that they are in the Western Conference Finals when they win game 2 of the Western Conference Finals. Like I just can't get there for a number of reasons, including like Sabonis last year in the playoffs was a huge liability. And I kind of feel like that's how he's going to be versus most of the top teams. I do think it's interesting with where the Nuggets sit, though. They're in a very good position, I think, despite the losing streak recently, to be able to provide them, I think, the focus, too, to be like, all right, enough screwing around. Like, that's what that game was to me last night. Was it that for you where they were like, all right, enough?
Yeah. Like Then last night, last night was the Wizards are so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like the Wizards were the worst.
The Nuggets don't have a lot of blowout wins this season.
Yeah.
So for them to
Jokic
go ahead,
is dialed. I mean, it was one of my takes is that I think Jokic, I was worried about him. Short break, didn't really get to go and do anything fun. He was even asked after the words, "Did you get to mentally recharge at all?" And he was like, "No, like not for me, man. I'm the one." But he was dialed in a way that I think was important. Include like sometimes we've seen him. I don't think it's a coincidence that he got his first triple-double against the Wizards last night because they've been bad the entire time of his career. And usually that means he gets to relax. Last night, he was not relaxed.
Yeah,
he was dialed in. And I think that stood out to me. And then my other big take, Matt, is that Christian Brown and Peyton Watson, again, caveat that it was the Wizards, caveat that's one game. I love the way both of those guys played last night because both of them seem to play, even against a terrible team, with the idea that their defense is first, second, and third, and that their offense is table scraps, not necessarily like plays. And I hope that is sort of their MO going forward because that's what the Nuggets need from them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to see kind of like a recalibration towards like can young guys flip a switch too in terms of it readjusting their flip a switch is a little bit different, but here in this context, but just of recalibrating towards the things that they're needed to do to win a championship.
Right.
And understanding those things. And those guys are smart enough, I think, to get that kind of sense. It's going to be, I think I'm really excited for this last stretch of games. It's always ugly in March. Everything gets random and crazy, but I am kind of excited for it. I was mentioning that the Nuggets don't really blow anybody out. I got a number for you. Here's a stat. The Minnesota Timberwolves have 23 wins by 10 points or more. The Thunder have 22. The Clippers have 21. The Pelicans have 22. The Mavs have 19. The Suns have 18. That's 1 through 7 in the West.
What was Denver?
Denver has 15.
You know what this means to me, though? Because I actually don't care about this. And I think Denver traditionally, if you remember even last year, the point differential was unimpressive. Yes. Pythagorean win-losses is always low. Here's my thing. Floyd Mayweather was not a knockout puncher. And he never lost, right?
Right.
It's stylistically, he was like, that wasn't his game. He's not trying to go out in the first round and land 100 punches. He was trying to like put constantly work on it. And I just think the Nuggets have the same thing. They don't play fast. They don't play they don't overwhelm you athletically. They don't do any of those things. But what they do is they just slowly grapple. They just slowly kind of get you, in the spots they want. And then they end up winning by TKO, and that's their game.
I'm very actually against the teams that run up the score.
Right.
And it's not like a ethical thing, right? This is professional sports. It's fine.
Big boys.
They're big boys. They're men. But I am kind of like, what are you proving?
Yeah.
Like, you're spending energy on this. What are you doing? What are you accomplishing with it? What is beating the Nets by 50 accomplish? What does that do for you?
I don't even know if it's as intentional as you're making it seem, though, Matt. I mean, sometimes it is. Let's not kid ourselves. But I think there is this other thing. I like the boxing analogy because there are great boxers who are like 15-10 with 14 knockouts. And it's like, are they great boxers? They're like, they're good. They're good. But the knockouts is what you see, and you're like, oh my God, this guy's a machine. It's like, yeah, but he also has 10 losses.
Yeah. And like, look, what you're talking about here too with the point differential, it's one of the reasons why, like, it's why I projected them so much lower than everything. Now, like, gun, it's really kind of funny because it's like, I had my prediction for where they were going to finish in the Western Conference. And then there was like, everyone's, the win totals were 54.5, and everybody's like, up in that kind of range. And it looks like we're going to split the difference, and they're going to be like 51, 52. Like, that's what they're currently kind of on pace for, depending on how much they rest guys. But I also think it's kind of interesting just to look at that that's why, like, I do have a hard time handicapping them. Like, I was talking about this on Buckets, which is my gambling show. I was talking about how the Nuggets spread performance is tied to their win percentage, right? Like, how often you're expected to win like your expected win percentage influences how much you're favored by in the power rating. And what's interesting about that is, like, the Nuggets tonight, like, I think that this number was 9.5 before Jamal was out. We pounced on that because I was like, oh yeah, no, back to back, the Nuggets is a double-digit favorite. Every number says they're not going to cover this. And it's like, usually if you say that they're not going to cover and you have that kind of confidence, you would be like, there's a possibility they lose. I'm like, oh, no, they're 9-1 when they're favored by double digits. They don't lose these games. They just don't handle it within the margin. And the style points, I think, is it's a very apt analogy of, like, that's how that stylistically is how Denver wins games. They don't win them. Now it's interesting because I don't feel like they win them ugly and close. They're not like scrapping out come from behind wins. They're just like, they go up, they win, they keep a lead of about 10 points. They end up winning between 5 and 10 points per game. Like, that's about what they do. And that's more than enough to get them to a spot where they can repeat as a champion. They do what's necessary, and I appreciate that about them.
Yeah, I agree. I've always thought this about the Nuggets. And by the way, the Nuggets, as you were talking, make me think they don't break analytics. That's funny because they take a ton of mid-range shots. Analytics is deeper than that, but a lot of teams are trying hard to avoid it. I feel like the Nuggets play a very smart brand, but are not encumbered by the idea of what types of shots they should be coming. They just naturally fall by them. Their Pythagorean win-loss is always low. Yeah. And again, not by design. They're not trying to do it. It's just by nature. And I feel like a lot of teams overcorrect to make themselves fit the ideal, when basketball is about aiming for the ideal, but being willing to fall wherever you are, where some teams I feel like are aiming for the ideal at all costs. So it's kind of an interesting little thing with the Nuggets that I think they have almost a weird purity to it. That's the wrong word, but they have a weird thing in that they're just not beholden to those things, and it works for them.
That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure to check out tomorrow's show with Swipa and or me, depending on if I can get time. Recapping the Blazers win. Appreciate you guys being with us. We'll see you on Sunday night for World's Finest right here on youtube.com/Locked On Nuggets. Hope you have yourselves a great weekend. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.